Everyone watched in horror as Connor Hayes, the youngest millionaire in Manhattan, poured a glass of vintage wine over a waitress's uniform at his own victory celebration party. The crowd held its breath. Murmurs rippled through the room. She had politely declined his drunken flirtation, and he had no idea who she really was or what she was capable of. What unfolded the next morning in the boardroom would turn his world upside down and change both their lives forever. The October wind crept along the palm-shaded boulevards of Beverly Hills like a reminder of transformation, of weather, of fate. On the top floor of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, Logan Pierce stood before the mirror, adjusting his burgundy silk tie, the shade he always chose when on the verge of a milestone. The Patek Philippe on his wrist caught a flash of gold as he turned slightly, but nothing stood out more than his eyes, a cold, calculating emerald green. At 29, once cramped in a South Side Chicago apartment, Logan was now CEO of Pierce Innovations, a tech company valued at hundreds of millions. He didn't need anyone to tell him he was successful. He saw it every morning in the reverent glances of his staff, in the glowing press coverage. And tonight, at the lavish party he himself was hosting to celebrate the $847 million merger with Apex Ventures. From the windswept heights, the city of Los Angeles sprawled beneath him like a high-stakes poker table, and he, the savviest player, was about to make his final bet. Meanwhile, not far away in a modest Echo Park apartment, Amara Jackson tied the apron strings around her waist and checked her hair in the mirror. The plain white uniform could not conceal her natural confidence, from her deep brown eyes to her caramel-toned skin glowing under the vanity light. To most at tonight's party, she was just another server. But nobody knew the truth. Amara was Apex Ventures' director of strategy, the woman behind a series of billion-dollar deals who would stand at tomorrow's press conference as the corporation's representative. She chose to conceal her identity this time not as a power play but out of curiosity about Logan Pierce, the man she had studied for months through numbers, reports, and cold fundraising calls. Yet numbers could not capture the whole of a person. Amara wanted to see for herself whether the man was worthy not only of the contract, but of the responsibility that such power entailed. The evening began with the clink of glasses and crystal lights dancing off glittering gowns. Amid the scent of expensive perfume, polite laughter, and insincere handshakes, two worlds were poised to collide in a way nobody could foresee. What do you think will happen when a man of power is challenged at the very moment he believes he cannot be wrong?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
The grand hall of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel was flooded with light from hundreds of crystal chandeliers suspended high above, their rays fracturing like glittering glass upon the icy marble floor. Amidst the lilting strains of a violin, impeccably tailored tuxedos and haute couture gowns spun through an air heavy with the sense of champagne, money, and calculated ambition. This was more than a celebration. It was Logan Pierce's display of power, and he stood at center stage. He moved through the throng as if every person were placed there solely to exalt him. The haze of Havana cigar smoke, the hollow congratulations, the loaded handshakes all dissolved under his confident stride, and the warm flush of alcohol coursing through his veins. Logan was at the pinnacle, and in that moment, he believed nothing could derail his path to glory. Amid the clamor, a small motion at the corner of the room caught his eye. No lavish ball gown, no sparkling jewelry, just a simple white uniform. Yet this woman stood out in a strangely magnetic way. Her sleek black curls cascaded over her shoulders. Her warm brown skin gleamed like velvet in the light, and above all, her expression was calm and unassuming, yet proud. She poured wine for a group of older guests, her gaze neither avoiding nor seeking attention, but it was that very composure that struck a blow to Logan's arrogant ego. Without thinking, he strode toward her, a half-smile unfolding as a reflex ingrained in his instincts. His footsteps rang like a war drum, and the crowd subtly parted, as if clearing a path for their king. He stopped directly before her, the scent of champagne clinging to his breath, his eyes scanning her face as though appraising a rare object. Raising his glass, his tone low and reeking of haughtiness, he issued an unspoken invitation. Everyone around knew what was happening, a silent proposition, a challenge, a gesture of entitlement masked as a joke. She did not shrink back. She simply shook her head, her eyes polite, yet unyielding. Logan was unaccustomed to rejection, especially from someone in a server's uniform. He laughed louder than necessary as though reasserting his position in the room. In that instant, alcohol and wounded pride collided, spawning cruelty. He lifted the goblet of red wine not to drink, but to vent his ire, and in a cold, deliberate motion, he tilted it. The deep crimson liquid poured directly onto her white uniform, seeping into every fold of fabric, staining like fresh blood. Every note of music halted. Silence enveloped the hall as though it had stopped breathing. Phones were drawn without a sound, ready to capture the violent moment, not for shock, but because they sensed this would make headlines. She stood there, unshaken, unmoved. The pungent smell of wine rose, yet it could not overpower the serenity etched upon her face. She held his gaze not with anger or pain, but with silent disappointment, more damning than any rebuke. Then her voice rang out, soft but unmistakable, not to humiliate him, but simply to affirm the truth of what had just occurred. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving behind the marble floor splashed with wine, the riveted stairs locked on her drenched back, and Logan still standing there, his triumphant smile fading. Not from remorse, but from his own bewilderment at what had transpired. On a night crafted to showcase his power, he had unwittingly provided proof of his fragile ego. And he did not yet know that the woman he had just humiliated would be the one to rewrite his entire life beginning tomorrow morning. If you were Amara, would you walk away as she did, or turn back to teach him an even greater lesson? Dear audience, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then stay tuned for the next astonishing twist. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we know you're still with us. The next morning, a thin veil of mist draped the Santa Monica sky, and sunlight sliced through the hotel's expansive glass windows like a silent blade, carving pools of light across the polished walnut conference table. Logan entered the building with heavy eyes and a dull headache lingering from last night's revelry. No one dared mention the party, but the furtive glances of a few assistants and the unusual hush in the corridor left an invisible echo that even he could not fully comprehend. The elevator carried him to the top floor, where the meeting that would determine the company's fate was to take place, a deal valued at nearly $900 million, opening the door for Pierce Innovations to join the ranks of tech giants. Logan had waited his whole life for this moment. Today, he believed he held everything in his grasp. He stepped into the boardroom, a space designed with minimalist precision, every line and angle evoking power and control. On the table lay printed contract binders, thick volumes assigned to each party. Logan's lawyers and advisors sat at their places, eyes bright under the warm glow of the overhead lights, poised to witness the historic closing. But just seconds after Logan took his seat, the door swung open. In that instant, the air seemed to drain away. Amara entered, no longer the waitress in a white apron from last night. Her hair was neatly pinned back, her face stern and unreadable. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit, fitted silhouette, high collar, and she carried a matte black leather briefcase as though it were her sole weapon in this room. Her footsteps were unhurried yet resolute. Each step toward the table erased the image Logan had formed of her, the server soaked in red wine, humiliated by a drunk man wielding power. No one in the room spoke. Even those who had never seen her before sensed a shift in authority. When she pulled out a chair and sat directly across from Logan, the balance of power had already changed. He, accustomed to commanding negotiations, suddenly felt his jaw stiffen and his heart race, as if he himself were on trial. Only when she opened her briefcase and slid a binder across the table did everything truly begin. Inside were a series of revised terms. Logan skimmed a few lines, but each word cut into his pride like a cold blade. Apex Ventures now demanded stringent post-transaction oversight, a board restructuring that included at least 3 independent members of their choosing, and most damning, a 6-month performance review period specifically for the sitting CEO. A chill ran down Logan's spine. The cloud of pride from last night's party evaporated the moment he saw the name printed at the top of the document. Amara Jackson, Chief Strategy Officer. She did not need to say another word. Her mere presence and her true identity was the sharpest retaliation for what he had believed was his victory last night. He felt as though the entire room spun around him. The empire he had painstakingly built brick by brick from a Stanford dorm, through sleepless nights coding on an old laptop, now risked being governed by those he had assumed existed only on legal paperwork. Yet what held his gaze was her. There was no gloating, no vindictiveness, no excess emotion, only the cold certainty of someone who knew her worth and understood the insult she had endured. In Logan's mind, last night's wine glass thrown in her face returned now as a business card, wielded with power and reason. No one would save him from this moment. No lawyer spoke up. No contract was thick enough to conceal the naked truth lying across the table. This confrontation was not between 2 corporations, but between a man used to issuing orders and a woman who had remained silent long enough to seize control. If you were Logan, would you sign the agreement with the woman you once humiliated? Or allow your pride to bring down the empire you built? After the meeting, taut as a high-tension wire, the atmosphere in the glass-walled room on the top floor grew so dense you could feel it with every breath. Logan stood motionless before the open contract binder, as if a piece of his soul had been left somewhere between those pages. His eyes, for the first time in years, were stripped of calculation or valuation, replaced only by confusion and loss. Amara rose and began to close the folder, slipping the documents back into her briefcase. As she moved to leave, Logan spoke softly, not with the domineering tone of a CEO, but with the voice of a man desperately clutching at something he could not yet name. His words were neither raised nor pleading, just a calm request, an urgent plea to be heard. Within minutes, the boardroom was cleared. Lawyers, advisors, assistants, all departed like a receding wave, leaving a prolonged silence between 2 people who had once occupied opposite poles of power. No conference table stood between them. No watchful eyes. Only the 2 of them, standing by the glass wall, with Santa Monica's beach stretching beneath the glittering midday Sunday. Logan leaned lightly against the frame, arms hanging loose, gaze drifting toward the horizon, where sea and sky met in a reminder of something far greater than himself. He did not rush to speak. When he finally did, his voice was no longer an instrument of command, but the fractured husk of a soul laid bare. He spoke not to rationalize, but as if at last he'd found the courage to face himself. He told her about his childhood in a South Side Chicago slum, where he and his mother shared a cramped apartment with a single bed and a leaky ceiling whenever it rained. His mother, working 2 jobs, daytime cleaning at a hotel and nighttime dishwashing at a diner, had preserved for him a set of worn math textbooks covered by hand-pressed plastic. He had nothing but a burning desire to live the life his mother had sacrificed. Then came Stanford. Endless nights coding in the dorm, fueled by cheap coffee to stay awake, while outside the windows played parties for kids born into everything. He'd never felt he belonged too poor to fit in, too smart to be ignored. He built his company like a lifeboat, not just to escape poverty, but to prove to the world he deserved recognition. Yet he hadn't realized that the higher he climbed, the further he drifted from the boy who once believed in kindness and fairness. Last night he had hurt her, and betrayed the mother who taught him that dignity isn't measured by an expensive watch or a CEO title. Amara said nothing. She listened, face composed, but her eyes no longer held the sharp edge they had in the boardroom. Deep within those brown eyes stirred something subtle, not forgiveness, but understanding. The distance between them remained, something no words alone could bridge. She turned to look at Logan. Light poured in around her, haloing her shoulders, making her seem more than a strategist by trade. She was the woman who had endured humiliation without breaking, who chose confrontation over retreat. She spoke sparingly, but each word struck at the most vulnerable truth. An apology could never erase what happened, but sincerity could be a starting point. The question was, from today on, what would he do to prove it? Logan nodded lightly. No promises, no excuses. Only silence weighted with meaning for the first time. He understood that power doesn't come from controlling others, but from having the courage to change oneself. In that moment, the spot where they stood ceased to be the stage for a billion-dollar deal and became the fragile boundary between past mistakes and the chance to make amends. Do you think Logan will truly change? Or is he merely seeking an escape from his shame? Beloved audience, stay tuned for the next installment that will leave you astonished. Take a second to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see viewers joining us from around the world. The sinking sun cast long shadows across the golden sands of Venice Beach, bathing the scene in a gentle amber glow. The ocean breeze carried a salty tang, brushing against their skin like a reminder of life in its raw, unvarnished form. After the mental sparring in the boardroom where every glance had carried the weight of power, Amara unexpectedly suggested they go down to the beach. Logan didn't ask why. He simply nodded, as though something inside him had just released, as light as the first breath, after a long-held hold. They walked along the tiled promenade parallel to the sand, past joggers, street performers, and the swoosh of skateboards composing a strange soundtrack. But in this moment, all that faded away. Only the steady rhythm of the waves and the sound of two sets of footsteps, those of two people who had once stood in opposition, now seeking common ground. No one hurried to break the silence. They walked side by side, their strides uneven but undistracted. It wasn't until the sun dipped near the water's edge that Amara finally exhaled, as if something long suppressed was finding its way out. She spoke of Harlem, where she'd grown up amid red brick buildings and sudden power outages. Her father, a man who always carried an old city map in his taxi, had taught her how to read the streets, how to see every turn and never lose her way, even when the world tried to mislead her. Her mother, a quiet seamstress, had stitched tiny dresses from fabric scraps, not to make pretty clothes, but to remind Amara that from the discarded, one could still create something beautiful. Yale was another world, entirely a place where Amara arrived on full scholarship, yet bore the scrutinizing gaze of every room she entered. She could not afford mistakes. A single slip could define an entire community. She worked twice as hard to earn half as much attention, but she never broke. She built a shell of steel not to hide, but to survive. Logan listened without interrupting. Each of her stories reflected a piece of himself he had long forgotten. When she paused, he shared his own tale of nights sleeping in his car, the old Honda parked behind a lot in Palo Alto, where he forfeited rent to funnel every dollar into his first app. Mornings greeted him with a stiff neck, the smell of worn clothes, and pitying stares from passers-by. Yet he kept raising himself for every pitch meeting because without his dream, he had nothing. The silence between them now was not tense but warm a space for sharing their most intimate truths. No one was performing. No one needed to prove anything. Only their scars and the mutual respect earned by surviving them. A wave lapped at Amara's shoes, moistening the tips of her sandals. She did not pull back. She stood still, gazing into the distance as if weighing past and future together. She knew Logan was no longer the drunken man from that night. But she also knew that no apology, however sincere, could suffice without action to follow. She turned to him. For the first time all afternoon, her eyes locked with his. The barrier was down. Yet forgiveness had not fully bloomed. It was a fragile point, a place where trust could begin, if tended with care. Logan said nothing more. He offered only a slight nod, an unspoken promise. A recognition that their pasts differed, but their reasons for confronting the world had been the same. The desire to be seen, recognized not for race, gender, or background, but for their true abilities and humanity. The sun touched the horizon, leaving a brilliant golden path across the waves. They resumed walking apart, yet moving in the same direction. Will empathy prove strong enough to mend the wounds between these two souls once at odds? Or will they continue side by side forever, never quite reaching one another? There are moments that require no fanfare, yet can still transform a person. And that morning, in the sunlit conference room in Santa Monica, the change did not come from a speech or a strategic handshake. It came from a single clause brief, but carrying the weight of trust offered with caution. Amara laid the new document on the table. She needed no further explanation. It stated plainly, if Logan Pierce demonstrates genuine effort over the next 6 months, not only on paper, but in his leadership, in rebuilding the work environment, in how he treats people, then Apex Ventures will loosen its oversight. Simple, yet enough to render the entire room silent. Logan picked up the pen but did not rush to sign. He stared at his printed signature in the bottom corner, the emblem of influence, of an empire he'd built with blood and pride. But today, it was merely a promise. Not to shareholders, not to lawyers, but to the woman who had once stood there, quietly, in a uniform soaked with wine, and had not bowed her head. He signed. The stroke was steady but deliberate, not out of hesitation, but because for the first time, he understood that the most important thing isn't holding on to power, but earning the right to it. A week later, Los Angeles basked in gentle sunshine. Logan entered a modest taco joint tucked between 2 nail salons and a dry cleaner where no one called him Mr. CEO, and no one knew of the company. He could have bought 3 city blocks with the price of a Beverly Hills dinner. No champagne, no chandeliers. Only wooden tables, metal chairs, and the faint scent of grilled meat in the air. Amara was already seated, a glass of lemonade in hand, her gaze following passers-by as if searching for an untold story. She wore no suit, no need. Today, they weren't there to negotiate. They were there to talk as 2 people, without titles or masks. Logan spoke of a new initiative he had launched, a nonprofit scholarship fund to support students from underprivileged neighborhoods, especially young people of color and immigrants. The fund would bear no family name, stand beside no corporate logo. Its sole purpose was to bring light to children who, like him and like her, had once been overlooked. Amara did not hastily praise. She listened, and for the first time, a soft smile appeared on her lips, not out of impression, but because she saw the honesty unguarded in his eyes. Their meal unfolded amid scattered laughter, stories weaving between nostalgia and hope. Neither felt the need to prove who was stronger, who had overcome more, who was more capable. They had moved beyond that. Now, they simply needed to know there was someone else who understood feeling underestimated, denied, yet still standing and moving forward. When they left the eatery, the sky had turned indigo, streetlights glimmering on pavement damp from the afternoon's brief rain. They did not hold hands. No overt gestures were needed to define the bond that was forming. Each step they took was proof of something deeper than words, a silent commitment that from now on, they would no longer walk for themselves alone. On the quiet street, they slowed their pace. Each carried a past of unseen scars, unspoken wounds. Yet in the silence between them, one truth shone clear. Forgiveness does not arrive in a single moment, but through a series of small choices. And today, they had chosen together to take the first step. There was no neatly wrapped happy ending, no sweet declaration of love, but something greater was beginning, born not of circumstance, but of the courage to become better, despite a past that once seemed irreparable. Do you think two people who once clashed in pride can build something truly beautiful together? Life doesn't always grant us a chance to start over. But when it does, what matters is not how many times we've been wrong, but how brave we are to make it right. Logan and Amara's story reminds us that power can't buy respect, and self-respect doesn't lie in position but in how we face our wounds, with ourselves and with one another. Each of us has made mistakes. Yet if we find the courage to change, if we're willing to listen, the one thing that remains can be something more beautiful than forgiveness, the chance to rebuild from truth, from trust. Thank you for staying with us to the very end. If this story touched you, leave a comment below where you're watching from, what time it is for you, and what moment you found most memorable. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with your loved ones in the United States so we're inspired to bring you more healing and uplifting stories like this. Because sometimes, a story can change the way we see life.